and welcome back to Rainbow Roundtable. I'm your host, Frank Sanchez, and we're here to delve into a compelling issue facing today's educational landscapes. Misinformation. Specifically, we'll be examining the intersection of misinformation, the teaching of history, and LGBTQ plus issues. We have a remarkable panel of experts, educators, and students who are at the forefront of tackling these challenges.
Why is this so important? We're in an age where information is at our fingertips, but discerning fact from fiction has never been more vital, especially for our educators, who are charged with preparing the next generation to navigate this complex world with critical thinking skills. So let's dive into what's coming up on today's show.
In the first segment, we'll take a journey back in time to understand the roots of misinformation, particularly as it relates to the teaching of history and LGBTQ plus issues. From the erasure of significant LGBTQ plus figures to the denial or revision of key events, this is a new battle. We'll discuss landmark moments that have shaped the trajectory of these issues and provide a historical framework to better understand challenges.
As we move into the heart of our episode, we won't be sharing specific real-world stories, but rather we'll imagine fictional scenarios that represent the very real challenges faced by teachers and students in Florida. Picture this: a classroom where a teacher is wrestling with how to balance state mandates that aim to control information while also providing an accurate and inclusive account of history, or consider students collaborating to question and debunk conspiracy theories, especially those that target the LGBTQ plus community. These imagined yet realistic stories give us a lens through which we can discuss on-the-ground issues educators and students face daily.
In this segment, our panelists will offer concrete tools and strategies to design to counter misinformation and to foster more inclusive educational environment. From role-playing exercises that demystify mechanics of misinformation to using open-source educational materials that provide multiple perspectives, there's a lot to gain here. We'll talk about how these can adapt to address the unique needs and challenges of LGBTQ plus students as well.
As we wrap up, we'll engage in a future-oriented discussion, the issue of misinformation, especially as it impacts the teaching of history and LGBTQ plus issues, isn't going away overnight. But there are glimmers of hope. In this segment, we'll explore possible future scenarios where schools and teachers adapt, policy changes are made, and students become more empowered and discerning consumers of information. Now, to help us understand the complexities of what Florida teachers and students face over LGBTQ plus issues, today we draw on a large variety of talent and experiences and representation. First, this is Frank Sanchez, a teacher and Safe Schools board member. He is my anchor partner today of Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. Welcome, Frank.
Hi, Liz. How are you?
Hi, Frank. Good, and you?
I'm good.
Now, let's welcome Vivian Diaz. Vivian is a proud Miami-Dade County Public Schools alumni and mom of two current students. She is deeply involved in school life, dedicated to fostering inclusivity for all. Welcome, Vivian.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me, Frank and Liz. I'm very honored to be here.
We are very happy to have you.
Thank you.
Next, let's add the perspective of a journalist. This is Hatzel Vela, respected Emmy Award-winning journalist at WPLG Television ABC Local 10. He specializes in education, Latin America, and Cuba. In January 2017, Hatzel became the first local television journalist in the country to move to Cuba and cover the island from the inside. Welcome, Hatzel.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Very happy to have you here. Next, welcome the streaming television host, Tiffany Williams. She hosts Tiffany Explains It All for Safe Schools. Welcome, Tiffany.
Hi, Liz. I'm so looking forward to the discussions today.
I am too. So happy to have you, Tiffany. Next, let's welcome Harold Marrero. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Safe Schools and Executive Producer for Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. Welcome, Harold.
Hi, Liz and Frank. Thank you for having me on today, and I'm very excited for the conversations that we're going to have.
We're very happy to have you here, Harold. Thank you for everything.
Glad to have you.
Yeah.
And finally, let's welcome Liz Morales. Liz has been an educator for Dade County's public schools for the past 17 years and has served as the GSA sponsor for the past 14 years. Liz is a trombonist for the South Florida Pride Concert Band, where she has also served as a youth trombone coach. Liz is Vice Chair of Safe School South Florida on the Board of Directors and my co-anchor for today's Safe School Rainbow Roundtable. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for these fantastic introductions. It is clear that we have a wealth of experience and diverse perspectives here today. Now that we've delved into the historical landscape and imagined a real-life hurdles students that teachers may face, let's pivot to something incredibly important: solutions. What can we actually do to combat misinformation, especially when it comes to LGBTQ issues in our schools?
Imagine our fictional teacher in Florida, bound by the limitations of what can and cannot be openly taught about LGBTQ plus history and issues. How can they circumvent the roadblocks? One way could be the inclusion of alternative reading lists that provide students with the resources to investigate LGBTQ plus figures, events, and concepts on their own. Websites, podcasts, and documentaries could also be solely recommended.
For those who are comfortable with technology, there's apps and platforms that allow for anonymous Q&A sessions. These schools can empower students to ask questions they may feel hesitant to ask openly, facilitating more honest discussion around the LGBTQ topics.
And let's not underestimate the power of role-playing exercises to create empathy and understanding. Our imagined teacher might enact scenarios that shed light on the creation and spread misinformation. For example, they could role-play a social media scenario where a false narrative about an LGBTQ plus issue is circulated, then have the students dissect what went wrong and how it could be rectified.
Now let's consider students who want to take matters into their own hands. Students-led initiatives can make a big difference. Imagine our group of students starting a school club focused on media literacy and critical thinking. They could also invite guest speakers, organize workshops, and collaborate with LGBTQ plus organizations to provide authentic learning experiences.
Lastly, there are countless external resources, websites like the Trevor Project or GLSEN, Gay and Lesbian and Straight Education Network. And Safe School's own website offers toolkits for both educators and students to create more inclusive environments and tackle misinformation effectively.
The goal is to empower. These tools and resources can transform passive consumers of information into active seekers of truth, particularly in matters affecting the LGBTQ community. So panelists, this leads me to ask, are there special tools or specific methods found and particularly effective in addressing LGBTQ misinformation in schools? How can schools and educators partner with external LGBTQ plus organizations to enrich their toolkits in combating misinformation? I'm eager to hear your thoughts and experiences. Panel, your turn.
I do have one question, if I could ask, about, because you two teach high school.
Yes.
Any sort of lessons that were being taught, like where you were saying that they would be teaching every single day a different gay historical figure, it wouldn't affect middle school or elementary school kids because they wouldn't necessarily do anything like that?
Well, so to be clear, we never taught it in class. So
Okay.
when those LGBTQ heroes were presented, it was something that was read over the morning announcements.
Okay.
So it wasn't like we're going, because as an American history teacher, I have my pacing guides, and I said before, we have things to cover because we have to get the kids ready for the EOC exam. So we don't have a lot of time to go into topics a lot. So a lot of history is very like that. Before we had the EOC exam, which is end of course exam, which is 30% of the students' grade, I had more freedom to okay, the kids are interested in this topic. I can spend an extra day in this topic and get more deep into it. Now it's kind of, I gotta hit my timeline. So we never had time to teach, queer history or African American history. So even African American History Month or Women History Month, it was very much maybe a homework assignment or very much a extracurricular thing or something with the club. The class itself does not allow for in-depth stuff. We cover a lot of stuff and we cover things thoroughly, but if we take too long, then we get behind. So we can't. And as far as middle schools, that before they stopped supporting it, that was put out to everybody. middle schools and elementary schools, and the teachers did what they wanted
What
to.
they chose.
Now, there are no GSAs, or there were never GSAs in elementary schools. We had some middle schools that had some GSAs. Not a lot of schools had GSAs, but there were some, and they were starting to because the society was a little, or the school board was a little more supportive, or the laws weren't there to prevent it. So they were we were moving down into that because we saw more and more kids come out earlier. So there was a need, and now I don't think there is.
There is a need.
Not that there's a need.
I mean, that there is not
allowed.
Allowed, yes.
So I'm not sure what goes on in middle school
Schools,
now because
yeah.
I don't have that perspective.
Yeah.
But I know that we had.
I was saying, as a perspective, both of my children are in elementary school, so a lot of misinformation was being put out there, especially when it came to the LGBTQ recognizing October as that month, because they were like, well, they're going to be taught, or the lesson plans are going to change, or this is going to happen, and it's like there is so much misinformation by just simply saying, let's recognize that there are gay kids that are in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. That's literally all we're trying to do.
Right.
That's it. And there's so much, and there were so many things flying around, like they're going to change lesson plans, they're going to make teachers teach this, do this, and it's like those are the things that we need to start combating from like in a local, hyper local level, because there's just so much that they just assume because of all these loud voices that are drowning out the voices, our voices. They're being louder and saying, well, they're trying to indoctrinate your kids and trying to do this, and they're listening to them without discerning and without looking and being like, wait, no, this is just recognizing that this happened.
Yeah, what I was going to add from a journalist perspective is that that's what we've saw recently when they voted this down. We saw a lot of misinformation, and what we've seen is sort of the political organization of different groups who send out messages that some argue purposely mislead. Specifically, we've had this conversation here, the parents who are too busy to really engage, or parents who come from minority backgrounds or working class who don't know what's really happening, and when they see something being sent saying, now they're going to change what your kids are learning and your kids are going to be learning this, of course they freak out, and of course they're going to come to the district and spout. You could hear it when you listen to the meeting. You can hear people say things that you're like, wait a minute, where did you get that information? Because that's not even what the proposal says. It's not saying anything about curriculum, but yet they're being told something by possibly some organized means. So that they can come out there and really, it's really fear, some say.
Yeah, and my favorite part is when they talk about, they don't want their kids learning about sex. And it's like, no one is teaching your kids about sex when they talk about Langston Hughes or Alan Turing or Marsha P. Johnson or, all these other gay heroes, queer heroes.
We're just saying we exist.
Yeah, we exist. No, there's no talk about genitalia. There's no talk about, positions. There's no talk about any of that. And and it's all about fear. So it's just for some reason, the people that have the biggest issue with it are people that can't separate the person who is queer from the act of sex. And they're overly focused on the sex and not focused at all on the person and the individual. And that's on them. Like there's something happening in them that's on them.
I think that's part of what has always happened with the LGBTQ community. We've always been sexualized. We've always been like, we're not people. We're people who have sex, and we're always focused on what happens in the bedroom. We don't focus that, hey, I have a house, I have a kid, I have a mortgage, I have a job, I have this, I'm tired, I want to go to bed. And all any of that. They focus on, what's happening in the bedroom, who's doing what to who, and all stuff. And it's like, that's not,
that's not none of your business. No one's going to your house asking you like, can I see your bedroom, please? Like, no one is doing that.
It's a beautiful bedroom, but no.
I think, but it goes back to the AIDS epidemic, because that's where you mostly hear it, especially from older generations, like my parents' generation, because in the during the 80s, AIDS was crazy, is because people were having all this sex, and I was just like, you can do that with any other thing like that. Like, why are you singling out a group of people, and then you're making that association again that gay people only do is sex. That's all they want to focus on, and it's like, no, they're people just like you and me. We like the same things. We could like the same TV shows, be in the same political party. It's just like, again, people focusing on the wrong thing, and you see it all the time online.
I think they use that to scare people, to scare
Yeah.
parents, because parents, let's face it, parents and the talk is very like, I don't want to have it.
It's awkward.
It's awkward. So having that conversation, so it's like, oh, gay sex, I don't want to have that. I don't want to talk about it. My kids are going to ask me questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? And as a parent, you get that question.
Yeah.
And you would know better how to answer it than I do.
I mean, well, my daughter is 9 years old, so we obviously haven't had the big talk yet. But she, I have gay friends. I have, she has friends whose parents are gay. So she's been exposed to it, and it's never been like she's grown up with it. Like we've made it normal for her. Like we've never been like othering or saying, well, they're gay. Like no. Everyone is who they are. We love them regardless. I mean, just because of who they are. We just want, we want everyone to feel safe and comfortable and not feel like we're ever judging them, because why? Why would you judge people for who they love or who they choose to identify? It's just like, it's for me, like I've always taught her, everyone is deserving of understanding and love, regardless of whatever you might think. Oh, look, they look a little weird. Their hair is acting a little weird. Oh, I don't like the way that they laugh. Or no, like we give everybody a chance, and then I've normalized that with my daughter, where, we talk about those things, and she's, up to the point where it's age appropriate for her. I feel very comfortable answering any of her questions, you know?
And that's the thing, age appropriate. And everybody thinks that, because we're including this, we're going to talk about inappropriate things with elementary schools. And we would never talk about, like if we were, I go back to the Holocaust because I teach it. If I were to teach the Holocaust to high school kids, it would be very different how I teach the Holocaust to elementary school kids. I wouldn't go into all the details, and I wouldn't show all the pictures that I would show, because they're young and they're little, and you want to give them information, but you don't want to scare them, or you don't want to, I don't know what the word
traumatize
them. And you would give more information in middle school, you give more information in high school, because these kids can handle the information.
As they get older, you evolve.
So the idea of what's my kid going to learn, they're going to learn what's appropriate in their thing. And
guess what? They're going to learn it anyway.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
That's
whether you want to or not, right? It's all out there.
Yeah,
I'll tell you. My parents didn't give me the talk about sex. I found out from looking it up in an encyclopedia. Okay, so like
that's old school.
That's really old school. Now this exists. But back then I had like a Spanish English like encyclopedia, and I was like looking, I was like, wait, what the hell is that?
What? That was not in my encyclopedia Britannica.
I didn't see that either.
Yeah. Mine was National Geographic. I was like looking at National Geographic. They went to Japan, and I'm like, oh, why? What's happening in Japan? That's very interesting. But let me ask you a question. Is Coral Park still doing freshman orientation? Because when I was in Coral Park, we had this one class, and I still, I remember this teacher was amazing. I love this teacher to death. And that class, I just remember it was a class that we went to, and all we did was watch movies, like historical movies about that made us think, and then we'll write about it, and then we also cover a bunch of different things. That's when I had a little bit of sex ed, was in this freshman orientation course, and it changed throughout the year. And I feel like that was a really cool way, because I was introduced to a lot of things. I mean, they played the band played on, and that's when I was like, whoa! Like I had no idea this was happening. And they played it for us in the class, and that began my interest in learning more about it, because I was coming from the perspective of my parents that this was a death sentence, that this was horrible, that whatever misinformation I came in with there, I left that class with a different perspective, and one that led me to explore more. But we also saw the Dead Poets Society. We saw Rudy, and then we would talk about it. So it was watching the movie, and then we would have discussions. But in the discussions, we were able to build empathy for the different subjects that we were learning from in these movies. So I wonder if that's still around.
We do have a freshman experience class, but it's not, I don't teach the class, but it doesn't really cover any of that. It's more like, hey, this is high school, and this is how you good study habits, and this is how, that stuff. I don't think they cover that type of stuff. I don't think sex ed is really pushed or covered in depth in schools anymore. I think people have shied away. We used to have clubs that focused on the HIV/AIDS issue to bring out information, and they would go to classrooms and have, it was student led, and the students would go to the classroom and they would kind of do a presentation to the class. And they
Isn't
would,
that the hip?
they do HIP, but I don't know if they cover that in HIP. But I know the students would go and they'll be trained, and then they'll go from the training, and then the students would give the trainings to the different classes and say, this is what you do, and this is how you prevent it, and this is how you catch it, and to get rid of that. We don't do that so much anymore, just because I think two reasons. One, AIDS is not a big news anymore. HIV and AIDS is not big in the media today. It's like, it used to be like, oh, this is there. Everybody's wearing a little red ribbon, and now like you don't see that. And the other reason, I think people are just always, not comfortable talking about sex.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And going back to what you were saying earlier about like, unfortunately, it is true that if you don't want to talk about it, your kid's going to learn it somewhere else. And I know it's an awkward conversation. Nobody really wants to talk about it because it's just like, you don't want to think about it, because if I'm telling you how this kind of works, then you're like, as they get older, they have a partner and you're like, I know what you do. Like, we don't want to think about that. It's like if you think about your parents, you know they do it, but you don't want to know how they do it, So, but it's just like, I think, again, what you were saying is just making it normal, like, yes, this is what happens. These are the things, like, it's okay. And I think, again, it's just, there's so much like around like shaming you about being in your own body or liking something that you like. And it may not be the same as somebody else, but also giving you like the tools of being like, okay, this is what you need to, make sure you're not catching anything, that you're being as safe as possible. And the thing is, the amount of stories I've heard from youth that come from very conservative households, and they'll tell me, they're like, no, I can't kiss. I'm like, why? Because, you'll get pregnant or something like that. Like something super, very crazy. And you're like, what? That's not even.
Like, that's the level of misinformation that we're fighting coming from the home, where they're like, you can't even kiss. You can't even hold hands because that's the sin. And then it's like, you're feeling ashamed. So then, of course, when they're exposed to different perspectives, they might just be fearful and not want to challenge the perspective of their parents and challenge their parents. But it's gonna happen one way or another.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Kids grow up, they start getting curious, they start learning. And if you as a parent, the way I look at it is, my daughter doesn't feel safe to come to me and ask me questions and make sure that I'm giving her the right information, not trying to learn from somebody else, then I failed as a parent. Because I want her to have that trust in me. And I know that mothers and daughters, you're always gonna fight, but like ultimately I want to be that person that she trusts above everyone else, that she knows that whatever information she's getting from me is accurate, is unbiased, is going to be the best for her, that I'm gonna make sure that she learns the best way she knows how. And for my son, that's going to be a different perspective. My son is autistic, so his way of learning is very different from my daughter's way of learning. So those are things that you need to adjust as they get older. So like, I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. 5-year-old, he's living in his own fantasy world with Roblox and everything. But my daughter's getting older. She's starting to, kids, as they get older, you get crushes, or they have crushes on you. And then it's like, it's a whole very cute thing, but it's also like, make sure that you trust me, that when you're uncomfortable or something happens, or if you have a question, you come to me. And then that's where I feel like I'm doing a good job as a parent, if she has that trust in me as her mom. So
I think so. One of the questions that we asked is, what can we do for teachers to do this, is bringing outside organizations. So Tiffany is one of our ambassadors. She works for Safe Schools South Florida, and now she has a new role that she's going to be going. She could go to schools, and what would you be doing?
I will actually be talking to teenagers in the community and basically just getting to hear their story, hear what's going on in their lives, hear what they are experiencing in the four walls of their institutions. And, just basically trying to be that voice for them, because it's very like you always see it whenever there's like a town hall meeting or you see these young people that are wanting to fight, speak and talk about what's going on, but no one listens to them. They're not really listening to them. They're kind of like, oh, but you're a kid. You don't really know what's going on. But it's like the fact that they're at a town hall meeting on a day that nobody very rarely do you see a lot of people at town hall meetings, and they're there talking about their experiences, telling you this is what I think should change. And you're not listening to them. Of course, it's very frustrating for them. And it's like if you need an adult face, then fine. Like, let's put adults in front, but we're also going to be just reflecting back what they're experiencing to them. And I mean, I'm very looking forward to getting to be with the youth and just seeing, what school is like again in a very whole different perspective. Like, I never went to school during a pandemic, but there's so much to learn from them even now. And I hope that my programming, like if Tiffany explains it all, that again, my programming and that I get to talk about pop culture like shows and anime and movies and, historical events and people, and getting to give them that little bit of that information of that queer history, but in a fun, lighthearted way that I feel like is even better, like approachable for people who maybe are hesitant, that don't want to talk about it. But if they see it, that it's like, it's not something so scary. Like, we like the same things. Like, we like the same movies. We even like the same movie stars that are a part of that community, And I think it's just trying to give that approach of like, it's not as scary as people make it out to be. It's actually like, you would be very surprised how normal it is, because that is somebody's normal.
Yeah. It is so normal. I've never understood the perspective of trying to other, and I mean, it's just the way that I am, where it's like, I've never felt like, why are we othering anybody for any reason? Unless you're trying to actively harm me or harm my family, then why would you other? Why would you
because of fear?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Fear,
and this HB 11 vote happened precisely because of that fear, because of that fear of retaliation, because of that fear that, like, these organizations that are well funded and pushing out this misinformation, you're scared because they put they're very easy to put a target on your back and be like,
I heard it recently, and this is their last hurrah for these people. They see that society is changing, world is changing, and they're like fighting tooth and nail to stop it. So they're putting out all this information to kind of prevent it, because they know that what's coming, the generation that's coming, the Gen Z, the younger kids, that they grew up with, my nieces and nephew grew up with an out uncle who has a partner for 20 years, or husband now because we got married, for 20 years. And for them, this is just my uncle. It's not my gay uncle, he's just my uncle. And this is my other uncle, and that's what it is. So they grew up with this. So they're going to be out there and they're going to be voting. So these people who are small numbers with a loud voice, because they're a minority. And because they get a loud voice, they seem like they're a lot, and they're not. And that's what we, as the majority who support this, have to get louder, because they're just loud, and
they're very loud.
They're very little,
and they want to intimidate.
Yes.
Their goal is to intimidate and to make us fear using our voices, because they want to drown everyone out. And like you said, this is like the deep, like, last gasp of them. They're throwing everything they can to the wall and see what sticks. That's why we've had Roe v. Wade be overturned. That's why we have Don't Say Gay. That's why we have all these like tiny little things that they're trying to like just crumble the wall little by little. But we have to understand that collectively, the majority of the polls show that the majority of Americans support LGBTQ.
In both parties, by the way.
Both parties.
Both parties across the board, regardless of Republican, Democrat, Independent. They support these issues.
And it's just this vocal, very like, they're just using intimidation tactics, and it's very unfortunate because it works to a certain extent.
So one of the things that teachers can do, or schools can do, is, so we may not be able to invite you to our classroom, but we can definitely invite you to our club. And so teachers can reach out to whether it's PRISM or Safe School South Florida and say, hey, Tiffany, can you come and speak to my Gay Straight Alliance? And Tiffany, you can come, and that's how we can give that information. So while guest speakers in classrooms are kind of not too much of a thing now because of our rigid schedule and a lot of topics, because English has it, and social studies has it, and science has it. We have all these exams that we have to do. Things can be done extracurricular. Things can be done during lunchtime. Things can be done after school, and we can invite these guests to kind of educate our kids on what they can do, whether it's providing information, how to get involved politically, or how to change things, how to engage them. So that's how organizations can help out, and that would, if teachers knew that, if sponsors knew that, and they knew who to contact, I think that would help. So, well.